Hey everyone, welcome to session 4 of our Propel series on passion. Today we're talking about creating with passion. And if you've joined us for the last few sessions on defining and identifying our passion, you might be asking yourself, well, now what? What do I do with my passion? How do I bring my passions into the workplace? How do I create something with my passion? How do I make time to pursue new passions? How do I even prioritize my passions? You know, very few women are actually operating out of their primary passion. Most women are living and working to make the dreams of those around them possible. And this is a noble thing, but we're all accountable ultimately to God for the gifts and talents that He has placed in us. And so we want to be good stewards of our God-given passions. Our hope is that you will dare to dig deeper and ask yourself if what you are doing is out of passion or obligation. Does your job make you come alive? Are you the very best version of yourself when you're at home or with your friends? Are you surrounding yourself with the right people? Have you accepted things as they are, or are you daydreaming about how they can become better? God has placed things in us, and it's our job to get them out of us and into the world around us. Remember, it's to our Father's great glory that we bear much fruit. And so our workplaces ought to be better because of our passion. Our homes ought to be better because of our passion. Our relationships should be better because of our passion. And ultimately, of course, our own personal lives should be better because of our passion. You know, what mark will you leave on the earth because of your passion? 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9, it tells us that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, nor has it even entered into our mind what God has prepared for those who love Him. God has so much more prepared for us if we're prepared to dig really deep and discover it. So whether you're running a Fortune 500 company, your own business, or a home, you still have not even conceived of what God has ahead for you. Passion is the fuel that keeps us searching, asking, trying, discovering, and pursuing Him and His ever unfolding purpose for our lives. Creating something with our passion can be so beautiful and so messy all at the same time. Just like us, beautiful, just like us. Beautiful and messy. You know, since we're speaking of beautiful and messy, I would love to invite you into this conversation with my friends who have all got awesome lives, beautiful lives, and very messy lives, that's for sure. And I'm really excited about all of you women on the other side of the screen that have joined us again today. Thanks for allowing us to drop into your chapter. We're just one big happy family. And so as you eavesdrop, for this first part, I hope that it is going to stimulate you to compelling conversation about how to create with passion. And so, Bianca, you're one of the most passionate people that I work with. You know, I am positively in a coma in comparison to you. So talk to me a little bit about how you brought your gifts into the A21 campaign and creatively just unleashed your passion there.
Right. I think, and we mentioned this in an earlier teaching session, but I didn't know that I was going to be passionate about this particular social ill. I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't even know that slavery was an issue that was as pervasive as it is today. All that being said, you and I happened to have a conversation. It was so random. It was kismet, serendipitous, or sovereign, whatever your theological suppositions are, however you're going to call it. God aligned a conversation for you and I to have. And that conversation, you just said, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to change the world for Jesus. And you asked me this question, and I'll never forget it. You said, are you doing that writing your blog? Because at the time, at 28 years old, I thought, well, I'm changing the world for Jesus, riding behind keys in my pajamas, living at my parents' house, you know? Right. And there's a season for that. Yeah. But at the same time, it was an invitation for me to rise. Yeah. So you had basically called out some gifts. You said I was writing at the time and editing and doing some freelance stuff and also volunteering very much at my church. And what you did in that one question is that you called out what God had wanted me to do and the gifts that I innately knew that I had and used it for His glory and His good. So I love to tell stories. I love to write stories. I love to synthesize things. It's just, I could see all the puzzle pieces and put them together. And I also love things that are beautiful. And there was this invitation to take this simple thing called social media, and whether it was 140 characters for Twitter, 440 characters for Facebook, or a blog or a newsletter, how can we begin to efficaciously tell stories that not just speak about the horrors and the travesty of human trafficking, the horrific thing that is going around across the globe, but to bring hope and light and beauty, and to see what redemption looks like for slaves across the world.
You know, I think what might really help people, Bianca, is one of the conversations we had when I walked into your office one day. And
Really?
I think.
Really? Really? You're going there? I'm trying to be holy and put together right now, Christine.
Because I think this is where most people live and miss huge opportunities in God because of the very issue that I think you need to tell everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so friends, let's just call this for what it is. I don't have a formal training to do what God had called me to do when I started A21. I was not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a philanthropist, not a social worker. I just loved words. That's all that I knew. And some people are called to be freedom fighters. God had called me to be a freedom writer. But after 3 months of working, if we're going to have real talk, when you work for a visionary who's crazy, your life gets flipped upside down. And I thought like I was, to be honest with you, I thought like I am going to just sit on Chris's lap. She's going to stroke my hair, tell me how awesome I am, and we're going to free slaves in the name of Jesus. And it was really like I'm dropping you into the ocean. Find your way back to California. And in that moment, I just felt so overwhelmed. I felt like this was not, obviously I did not hear the voice of God. The passions are aligned. I'm deaf to the voice of God. And I hadn't seen Chris in 3 months. She lives on a plane. She walked into an office, my office, that had the water tank and the refrigerator and no windows.
You had a water view.
A water view. Do you see what I have to deal with, friends? Very long story short, I basically told Chris through tears, I don't think I can do this because I know I wasn't called to this and I don't know what I'm doing. And I literally was just telling her, I'm done. And the loving, merciful Christine came and said, do you think I'm called to do this? Do you think I'm called to do this? I'm like, yes. I didn't know how to respond in that moment. Yeah. And she said, what has God put in your hand?
That's right.
God has put this in your hand. Yeah. And if God has put this in your hand, then this is what you're called to multiply. Yeah. And she had said, I'm not called to fight slavery, which to me, I'm like, well, you're in the wrong profession, honey. She's like, I'm called to do what God's called me to do. And if God has called you to do this, God's going to equip you.
That's right.
That was it.
That's right.
And I was like, oh, okay. All right, okay. And then after that, it was basically, from that point on, she was like, here's water, turn it into wine. And I had to just start performing the miraculous. But I will tell you something. Yeah. When there is a challenge and an invitation, her words rang true. Yeah. That year, we grew at a rate of 110% on social media. We funded, essentially at that point, the job that I had, and we created a team of 4 new interns. And so there's an invitation to do brave, bold, and dangerous things.
Great.
Are we willing to receive?
Yeah, that's so good.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's so good.
That's great. No, I love it. I don't want to follow that.
Okay, I'm going to follow it because it's similar. Okay, Chris has this gift for identifying, boom, you, come on in here.
Yeah.
I did my own thing for years. You in Nashville, you and Nick came to town and you were like, you're going to come do this. And I went, I don't know. You, come on, let's do it. And I realized, okay, I can put my passion to use through collaboration.
That's right.
And that's the key.
That's right.
Putting that passion inside you, collaborating and getting to work together with people with a similar goal who are on fire.
It's great.
That's magic.
Yeah,
totally. I wanted to be that person dropped in the ocean. Figure it out. Like, I'm a builder. That's what I love.
I'm a vacationer.
Okay.
I wanted an island
throw a
in the
party.
ocean.
That's what I want to do.
With a chase.
Right.
There's not a way to do it. I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But the beauty about the collaboration is that you love that adventure. I don't. I love things that are fun and
We
beautiful.
hold each other's hands
We
a lot.
do.
We do all together.
Chris, you've always said that we are stronger together than we are individually.
Absolutely.
And
Amen.
sometimes,
Absolutely.
especially in our culture, especially in Western American culture, we are building idols unto ourselves. What can I do? What are my purpose? What is my passion? And sometimes God has called us to be part of something larger. And what can we do together by aligning with vision?
And it's a
accomplish
great
so
honor
much
to
more
serve
together. And women are terrible at this because women tend to come from a place of insecurity. Yeah. So we think if somebody else gets the limelight, that means I get less, like God has a pie. Yeah. And if somebody gets a big piece, that inevitably means the geometry is less for us. And it's like, no, Chris and I get to do some events together. And I've had so many people say, it's going to be so hard for you to speak after Chris. and you know why? It's not hard to speak after Chris because Chris is an activator. I mean, I'm ready to charge hell with a water pistol. When Chris teaches, I'm ready to go to wherever it is.
right.
I am so much more pastoral.
Yes.
And so Chris, one time she said, why do you keep talking about the love of Christ, the love of Christ, the love of Christ? I was like, that's kind of what I love to talk about. But I was like, you get somebody who's prophetic with somebody who is a little more pastoral. That actually is a really, there's some great balance in that.
Great.
And I think for women to go, wow, it is so much more fun to run the race with everything I have and scream for the girls on either side. And with Chris, with anybody, whoever is on your team, I have a much better shot at getting the World Series ring and the bonus with a team than I do by myself.
That's right.
So if we would spend a little more energy collaborating and cheering genuinely for each other, when the water rises, all the ships rise. That to me is actually a biblical template.
That's right.
You don't see these people who are isolated in Scripture. Nobody said that Paul was better than his baby brother because Paul preached to thousands, and Peter preached to thousands, and Andrew led Pete to Jesus.
Right.
Whose job was more important? They just had different skill sets.
That's right.
Pete wouldn't have been leading, Pentecost had Andrew not said, "Come, I've met the Christ." So I think if we would, as simplistic as it sounds, not only bloom where we're planted, but bloom and then be fired up about the beauty of the blooms around us.
That's so good.
Revival really would happen.
So true. I think you're so right about that collaboration. There's something about being motivated by those around us that forces us to be creative and innovative. For example, if you ask me, come up with $100,000 tomorrow, I'll be like, Juice says I can't. If you say, I'm gonna hurt your son if you do, hold up, I'll be back with your money.
That's right.
I will find a way to make it happen because I'm passionate about my child. I want him to do well. I thought about the 4 men who cut a hole in the roof for their friend to reach Jesus. So passionate people, they don't see obstacles, they create opportunities.
They create it.
They don't let their limitations get in the way. I love what Peter, and when they're healing the man at the gate called Beautiful, he said, silver and gold I don't have, but what I do have, I'm going to give you. So my limitations actually create opportunity for you to be healed. I stinking love that.
Big cartwheels.
So a lot of women stop short of pursuing their passion because I'll wait till I have kids. I'll wait till I'm married. I'll wait till I graduate. I'll wait till I'm eloquent. Don't wait for anything. Create opportunities right where you are.
And
have those moments.
Is messy.
It is.
And you talked about that at the beginning. We're in the middle of trying to sell our house. And the other day, Missy's just learned to spell my name. And so she can spell Missy, but she's just learned to spell Mama, which I love when she calls me Mama. But golly, sorry, estrogen is rising as I speak. Anyway, she had all these big pieces of construction paper that had sticky on the back. And she had written Mama really big on them. And she had put them all over the living room to surprise me. Well, the realtor was coming over. We were just about to show the house. And she goes, "Look, Mama, do you like it?" And I thought, oh, crud. I have about 15 seconds to make a decision of whether I'm going to pull down all these things that say Mama or whether I'm going to let the house show with my baby's artwork all over it. And I thought, I'm leaving it up. I'm leaving it up. And I think we forget that's how God is with us. We want to wait till we're, Renoir or Rembrandt or the guy who cut his ear off. And God is saying, one of them. And God is saying, just paint. Whatever you paint is so beautiful, just paint. So I think we're all creators because we were made in His image. He's a divine creator, redeemer. We may have different mediums, but just paint. Just sing, just write, just step into it with everything you have.
And if we could get people to take that first step and knowing, and I think a lot of social media, what it does is we see everybody else's highlight reels, everybody else's finished product, and we don't even step out because we think, I'm not that. Well, I wasn't this at 22 when I started. So I started driving, 4 14-year-old girls to youth group. That's it. But most people don't want to start with the 4 14-year-old girls, and I'm going, well then honey, at 49 you're not likely to be running a global anti-trafficking organisation or a women's community. So I think what we have to do is start where we are with what we have, and then allow God to come in and to begin to multiply that and bless that. And we could talk about this forever because I think when you start talking about creativity, God gets fired up because that word creation is right there, right in the beginning of Scripture, and God just specializes in making something out of nothing. It's just what He does, and that's what He's done with us. And we ought to continue to do because we're created in His image. So I know we're going to have some great questions because I'm surrounded by some great creative women around here. So I'm really looking forward to taking some of those. When it comes to creativity and passion, I know that there'd be so many questions, so I'm pretty eager to take a couple off the floor. Who's got some for me?
I've got one for you. Help me understand the best way to navigate. I've got a creative idea. I'm excited about it. I'm passionate about it. I've been thinking about it for years, actually. And I present it, and it's squashed.
Right.
How do I respond, and what do I do with that?
I think there are so many layers to that. You know, it depends. As I've come through life and leadership in the last 27 years, there were just different seasons where I had great ideas. In fact, the embryonic form of what is now Propel, I've probably had on my heart for 10 years. And I would sort of put it out there and it would just be squashed from people that were key influences in my life and people that, and you know what I have to accept in those cases, that God was sovereign and it just wasn't the timing of God yet. But then there did come a point when we launched it, so over this last 12-month period, where even though there were some people that were resistant to it, I knew in my heart of hearts that, okay, I've got to be all in. Am I willing to potentially jeopardize losing some relationships, losing some support, just losing the favor of people whose favor was very important to me? And I knew, and there was a difference, although this has been in seed form there for 10 years, there's the sensitivity to the Holy Spirit where there are times where you yield and submit and go, okay, it's just not timing yet, the resources aren't there, it may put a strain on my family and my marriage, that it's just not right at this moment. So God has timing and rhythms, but then there are times where you go, okay, there's going to be a cost and there's going to be a sacrifice and you have to be willing to do it. It's discerning that. And again, I think we talked a lot about having wise counselors around you, wise decision makers around you, because everything affects somebody. And, you know, the Lord didn't call me to do this and for my marriage to be a mess or for my children to go off the rails. So He's not schizophrenic. It doesn't go, well, you know, I lost that because of my ministry. Well, no, you probably didn't prioritize things in the right timing and do it in the right order. So, you know, the Apostle Paul says in Philippians, do nothing out of selfish ambition. And sometimes that selfish ambition drives us to step out of the timing of God, out of the plan and purpose of God. And then other times our fear of man causes us not to do the thing that God's called us to do. So there's your two. You need wisdom and discernment and wise counsel.
That's right. That's right.
I think, is there another one? I'm going to keep
I have a question. Are you intentional about being creative, taking time in your daily life or weekly life to, and what does that look like?
I'd love probably Ali to answer this in a sense of that she's just finished a book but had a full-time job and has 5 sons and a husband in the midst of all of that. So how do you creatively write a book while you're launching a brand new ministry as well? So that's a great question.
Well, people like to think that if you're writing a book, you're going to be at a writing cabin or you're going to go on a writing retreat and everything's going to be great and the creative juices are going to be flowing. No. It was working a 60-hour week. It's waking up Saturday morning, kissing the kids and being like, Mommy's going to lock herself in the bedroom. And then maybe every hour banging on the door and sticking my head out going, I cannot ever finish this chapter if y'all don't be quiet. That's what it looks like. But the boys knew, okay, we have 9 more weeks. Mommy's got her Saturdays. We're gonna be quiet until 4, and then we're gonna go out and party. So it didn't look perfect. There wasn't a writing cabin. I didn't get to go to on a cruise for a couple of weeks. There's no sabbatical. I was just in it, and it was ugly. And I felt like it was important. I would always Instagram it because I wanted other women to see it, to be like, life's messy. And who knows how this is going to turn out because it's crazy right now. Like, let's just get real.
And I find that if you get in the slipstream, things come now. You know, it's this ethereal idea that we're all going to sit on a Greek island and be just inspired with creativity. You've got to create spaces, but find it where you are. You know, I grew up in government-assisted housing in the poorest zip code in my state. There was nothing nice about my surroundings. There was no greenery. It was just like literally bars on all the windows, graffiti everywhere. I mean, just your stereotypical of what you would think for low-income housing. And yet there was where I wrote all my first sermons. There is where because I had to find God in the midst of all of that. I would go for walks. I would find it welling from within in a state of peace and calm in my soul. And I am so inquisitive. Anything can inspire me. And so I find that's what you have to do. And I just read books that are outside of my either just interest even, just so that I can spark different parts of my brain. I'll try this year, I've taken on some different weight training just because I want to just confuse my muscles a bit and start thinking differently and just get and that's caused me to go, wow, I'm thinking differently about different things. So put myself in different environments, talk to different people, you know, rather than waiting for the one day when, in the by and by, when all the planets will align, because that isn't going to happen.
That's right. That's right. I think sometimes homogeneity kills creativity. And so I am intentional about spontaneity. And there are times that I go, you know, I kind of had the same thing as Allie. I wrote a book over Christmas. It may be a really bad book, but
you just never know.
I mean, I only had like 6 weeks to write this book, and it was Missy's first Christmas. And so I made a very intentional choice that during the day I'm going to be all about Missy and Christmas, and I want her to just understand kind of the celebratory aspects of this, and I want to have fun and be spontaneous. And then I'll write, after I put her to bed at 9, I'll write from 9 to 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. And then for the next few weeks, I'll sleep 4 or 5 hours of night because it's a season. But I was really intentional about spontaneity because I did not want to overschedule her. So we went on motorcycle rides, and we went on hikes, and we went sledding, and we did all these things. And actually, I felt like I was so much more, I love your word efficacy because I think it sounds so cool. There was a lot more efficacy in my writing. I was much more creative because I'd had so much fun with my baby during the day. So I think to actually succeed at being creative, we've got to be intentional about spontaneity, because that's
so true.
That's one of the places where I think it's fertilized.
The atmosphere around you isn't necessarily the only thing that creates that atmosphere for creativity. Sometimes it comes out of pain. Sometimes necessity is the mother of invention sometimes.
Amen.
You know, there are times when I'm with my children and I just see a moment and I'll not jot it on my phone. I'll use that as an illustration when I teach the Bible. Literally, it's on my phone in Target, which Target is of the Lord. Let's just be honest. There's Chick-fil-A, there's coffee, there's Target. I mean, these places are anointed. The Starbucks, it's just an anointing. It is. So I'll literally jot on my phone, and that's my creative process. People don't realize that it's on the go. It's as we're going.
That's right.
God gives us that.
That's right.
Which is awesome. Okay, I think we've got time for maybe one or two more. Is there another question? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how do you cope with the disappointment that the messiness of creativity can bring you, as in you finishing something and then it not turning out the way that you had intended it to?
Sure, because that has never happened to anyone. Absolutely never. So, you know, Bianca, because perfection is your middle name and everything you touch turns to gold, maybe you want to speak to this.
Right. I would say in A21, there was a project that I kind of begged to have. I said, as a storyteller, we need to communicate not just the issue of human trafficking, but the solution and what people can do and how do we tell stories. And quite honestly, how does this generate funds? Because we can only do what we can do when we have the funding to do it. So it was something called the Freedom Report, and basically that charts our 12 months of success. I fought, I mean, from here into the return of Christ, that this is going to be our saving grace. This is amazing. This is wonderful. And worked incredibly hard on doing it. I will say, to speak to the first question about what happens when it's rejected. Number one, it got rejected 3 times, and it boiled down to a number of issues: not having team, not having budget, this sort of stuff. When we finally had those things aligned, we get the project done, and it was really a really good project. The launch of it, probably wasn't the most successful. That's hard. Not just because I struggle with perfectionism, but it's hard because you really believe in something.
Right.
But you know what? When if we take Moses' rod, I love that God asked Moses, "What's in your hand?" And he said, "A staff." And God told him to lay it down. And sometimes God asks us to lay these things down, which represent who we are, which represent our calling, which represent our identity, even our income. We lay it down. It's either for one of two reasons. If God asks you to lay it down, it's because it's not for you to carry anymore, or you're going to pick it up with greater strength. And we saw in the life of Moses that he picked it up and it became something that was dangerous. An inanimate object became an alive object, and it became a stake, something dangerous. And so what happens when you lay this, let's say a creative process down, a dream, a book, an article, a song, a blog, you lay it down and it feels like failure, it's either because that was not yours to carry, or you're going to resurrect it in a new strength in its due time. When Chris was talking about it's not maybe that season, Propel is the strength that Propel is today because it was in labor for 10 years. Our Freedom Report that comes out in July is going to be our strongest, best Freedom Report that we've ever done to date. And guess what? I no longer do the Freedom Report. And it pains me because that was my baby. I birthed that. And when it was pried out of my hands, I was angry. But I look at the success of it now, it's because it wasn't mine to carry.
Yeah. And don't forget what, when somebody calls your baby ugly, it hurts. But don't forget, God is the author of what we're doing. If your pen is submitted to Him, I mean, some of the sweetest moments I've ever had in vocational ministry, I can trace back to a mistake on my part. One time I was writing in a woman's book, and I have a little bit of ADD. People were talking right here, and I wrote something they said out loud into her book in black magic marker. And I was like, oh, crud, how can I fix this? And all I'm thinking is I've written this big mistake word in the sweet woman's book, and I end up coming up, I think, with this weird verse that includes the mistake word. And I thought, cool, this will be like scrapbooking. I'll fix it, make it look like I meant the mistake word. Long story short, this woman was just in a really, really deep pit, comes back around and says, I need to talk to you about that verse you wrote in my book. And I was like, wasn't even sure it was a verse, because sometimes I'll quote something and go, I think that was in the Old Testament. And so I wasn't even positive it was a verse. And she said, that verse you wrote in my book, she tells me this whole story about how she felt like God wasn't hearing her. And she said, I opened my book and I was just shocked to see that the verse you inscribed was the verse I chose as my life verse when I was in Campus Crusade in college 25 years ago. She said, it's such an obscure verse. I haven't thought about that verse in years. And she said, and here I am going, Lord, you don't see me. I opened my book. I've never met you before this weekend. And she said, that verse, out of all the verses you could have chosen, that verse is what you inscribed in my book. And she goes on to say, thank you so much. And I said, it is a bigger miracle than you think. And I said, I wasn't being wise or a sage prophet or even a good teacher when I did that. I was trying to cover up a mistake. That was my motive. But our God is so kind and so good that in His mercy, He takes even things that are messy, something you've created, and somebody says your baby's ugly, and in His sovereign mercy, if we're submitted to Him, even that He'll weave into a beautiful redemptive tapestry. So you may not see it now. Moses didn't stand in the promised land until he was next to a glorified Jesus. He was buried on Nebo. Do not think our lives are confined by time and space. This is not our home. We are aliens and strangers here. So what somebody tells you is a failure, do not own that, because if you're submitted to the Lord, He will weave it into something redemptive.
So good. Fantastic. And I think on that note, we've given you some great stuff to discuss in the Propel chapters right there in your location. So it's my hope that after this conversation and the conversation you're about to have with the women around you, that you understand more about creating with passion. And I hope that you experience creative freedom in living out your passion. Remember to bring all of you to what you do, and by doing that, what you do will become like all that is in you. It is often by bringing our passion into where we are that we discover the passion in where we are. Enjoy your conversation.
Wow. Exclamation point, exclamation point.